Thank you for joining us today on our webinar going over micro-segmentation for zero trust, security, and compliance. My name is Austin. I'm the VP of Audit Solutions here at YouAttest, and we are extremely lucky to be joined by some amazing panelists today. So first off, we have Milton Keith. He is a senior sales engineer at Guardicore. Then we have Brian Shepard. He's an account manager at Cloud Ingenuity. Then two people over at YouAttest, we have Cher Azam, our product manager, and last but not least, Garrett Grajek, the CEO.
Thanks, Austin. And let me say a few words about our special guest, Milton Keith. Milton is an exceptional engineer. And I mean, not just exceptional, just a real engineer. He was like employee number 5 at a two-factor company I started many years ago, 15 years ago. And Milton looked at our organization and said, you know, Garrett, we might want to document what the product is. And he wrote the entire documentation for the product, we had none. He's that engineer. He is your conduit from technology to how a customer can actually deploy this stuff. So let's have some fun, and we will, because Milton and I love the guy, love the way he works. But we know our stuff, and Milton knows his stuff. So let's go.
Oh, thanks, Garrett. I'll have to pay you later for that compliment.
There you go. Happiness.
Perfect. Now that Garrett crushed that introduction, we are going to go just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. First off, Milton's going to start with what is micro-segmentation and zero trust. Then Garrett's going to take it over and talk about how does zero trust relate to compliance. We'll pass it back on over to Milton. He's going to go through a live demo on Guardicore and micro-segmentation. Then Cher of YouAttest is going to talk about how YouAttest helps you meet these compliance standards. Finally, we are going to go into a quick demo by myself going over what Cher outlined. And Brian then will have an opportunity to talk a little bit about Cloud Ingenuity and how his solution can help in this process as well. Please hold on to all your questions. Everyone on this panel will be available to answer your questions in real time. So we're live today. Feel free to chat those in as we go along or hold on to them, but you will have an opportunity at the end to ask those. With that being said, Milton, I'm going to pass it on over to you. Thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Garrett. And thanks, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Austin, if you can move forward on the next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about is what is zero trust. Obviously, you're all aware of it because you've heard about it. This actually started back in 2011. It was created by a good friend of mine, John Kindervag, based here in DFW, where I'm out of. And it came across as, hey, this is a really great idea. It's really the policy of access of least privilege. But it's been over a decade now since Forrester first introduced that concept. The problem has been it's taken both the vendors and enterprises years to figure how to make it real without drowning into infrastructure complexity. But after many years on the whiteboard, zero trust is now something that can be quantified, qualified. We can actually implement. If we go to the next slide, please, Austin. So Dr. Chase Cunningham, who just recently left Forrester, this is his definition of what zero trust is. It says zero trust is strategically focused on addressing lateral threat movement within the network by leveraging micro-segmentation and granular enforcement based on user context, data access controls, location, app, and the device posture. We can go to the next slide, please. So why does zero trust matter? We've all heard about the Colonial Pipeline. When we created the slide, there was the Fritz frog that botnet that Guardicore discovered. Now, you might say, okay, so what? It's a peer-to-peer botnet. This botnet used 0 files. It was completely fileless. Everything was done 100% memory. Even the command and control was not outside the botnet. It was all done in the peer-to-peer botnet. It was extremely aggressive with the number of usernames and passwords that it used. So this is a textbook use case on how the zero trust model would have been more effective than your traditional approaches to security. And we'll talk about a little bit later about the Colonial Pipeline. Next, please, Austin. So why haven't enterprises implement? So according to the Ponybonne Institute, they said 43% of organizations said they're interested in implementing micro-segmentation, but only 26% have. And the reason why they're holding back is they say legacy firewalls do not enable zero trust across the enterprise. And that's what you're going to see is a completely different approach to zero trust from the micro-segmentation aspect with Guardicore. Next, please. One thing to keep in mind, though, as I go through this, there is no one single product that's going to be able to enable zero trust across the board. It's going to take an entire ecosystem. And that's why you have 3 vendors here today. You have Guardicore, YouAttest, and Cloud Ingenuity, is to talk about our pieces that we help with this entire ecosystem for doing zero trust. So the 5 steps that Forrester map out is, first, you need to identify your sensitive data. Where is it? Because ultimately that's what it's about. It's about protecting your data. Number 2, you need to map the flows of your sensitive data. 3, you're going to architect what they call their micro perimeters. That's what you're start creating your firewall policy for that zero trust environment. 4, you're going to continuously monitor your zero trust. So what kind of detection capabilities? Where do you tie into the entire ecosystem? So as you look at products, you got to make sure these products have an API, have pre-built integrations. Can they integrate with the rest of your ecosystem? And finally, 5 is embrace automation, and that's through APIs and scripting and orchestration. Next, please. So now I hand it over to Garrett.
Great. Appreciate that. Okay, let's talk about zero trust and compliance, straight out. Now, my brain is, since the world's a 2-factor SSO, is 100% on compliance now. So I look at everything now in the world of compliance. Like I was just reading, look it up, TSA. What the hell does TSA have to do with compliance and regulations? Well, a little colonial pipeline hack kind of upset everyone, right? And so that's when you see people start to scramble. So the TSA is now ordering all the pipeline companies in America to go, and they have to do cyber reports. Why do I bring that up here? Because listen to what we're saying here. Listen what Milton says. Listen what Cher comes on, our product manager, about how to audit your micro-segmentation for access rules. Listen, watch Austin's demo. Listen to Brian, how he ties together. Regulations around zero trust are going to be implemented. So let me talk. So what we're going to talk about here is, no, leave it on that last slide. Sorry, Austin. Is we're focused on, there's 7 tenets of zero trust. That's what the world's kind of conglomerated on, and NIST has done a good job, and I'll get into that. But there's 7 tenets, and the 3 that are most relevant to this hour we'll have with you is communication, and it's, remember, there's no communication within the enterprise and without and outside the enterprise, because as Milton and I have often said, there is no spoon, right? There is no firewall inside and outside. What are you doing about your communications? That's zero trust. Then per session, we have to go away from authenticating once and then voila, the person has to go everywhere, and then have a dynamic policy. Next, these are the regulations that we every day are dealing with here at Utest. This is where we're helping our customers. HIPAA, high trust, healthcare, SOC for cloud, SOX for our publics, ISO for international companies, and PCI DSS. Do I see these regulations of zero trust creeping into all these? There's no question they'll creep into. They're already part of them. Go, and I'll talk. There's 2 in 1. All those regulations above, all those guidances above, borrow from ideas from this. That's our wonderful federal government, non-regulatory agency that comes up with standards. And then the guidance groups pull those recommendations into compliance measures. And the 2 ones that I see most relevant are PRAC-4, which says access reviews for who we're allowing in. And we're going to show a little demo of that, how it can work with our friends at Guardicore, and you can audit your policies. Extremely relevant. Number 2, this is the one where we do a terrible job in. And I mean we, everyone on there is part of the IT community. Principle of least privilege. How did people usually get access? They scream a lot. They scream a lot at the IT guy. Come on, man, we got to get that. Okay, that doesn't work for the audit. That doesn't work for compliance. Why did you grant access? I don't know. I had a manager yelling at me. What we need to show is why we gave access. Not only what access, but why. That's called governance. Keep going. Okay, so this is going to come up in your life. This really is. This is NIST SP 800-200-7. Why do I say this is going to come up in your life? Well, I don't know, guys. Look it up. Look it up, the presidential order. Look at everything. Zero trust is coming, right? Which means the guidance is that our wonderful standards body, and they are wonderful. I had a fortune of presenting to them many years ago. They're very, very knowledgeable, very decent people, have put out what they feel a zero trust architecture is and what a zero trust enterprise should look like. All right. And everything we say on this webinar is completely in line with it. So what I'm saying, and I'm concluding my section here, is no, I'm not saying zero trust right now, word for word, the 7 tenets are in your guidance, but the sections are already in and creeping more into your compliance measures. So what is your task? Your task is to listen straight out. Listen what Milton has to say. Listen what Cher has said to say. Watch Austin's demo and help yourself understand and prepare for a zero trust world, not only in your infrastructure, but in your auditing and compliance. Next.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Garrett. At this point, I'm going to pass off the screen over to Milton, and he's going to go through a quick demo, just outlining Guardicore and micro-segmentation. So bear with us while we make that transition.
Thanks, Austin and Garrett. Okay, so we're going to talk about what is micro-segmentation and kind of go through a demo of Guardicore at the same time. So remember those 5 steps I showed at the end before I passed it off to Garrett. The first thing you want to do is identify your sensitive data. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to come in here and let's identify that sensitive data. One of the things Guardicore does is it helps you map out your environment. So as soon as you start deploying our stateful inspection firewall, we're going to start just creating a map, a visualization. And here I can just look for databases. I can see where the databases are locating. And what I noticed down here is here's a SWIFT database down here. That was usually used with international money transfers. I can see another one. And I can take these type databases right here and I can see there's an accounting database right here. And I can come in here and say, label these as critical high. That I can do that with this. Because what Guardicore does is we help you disambiguate through all this information. When I was a chief security officer before I went back to sales where I joined Garrett, I used to tell my vendors, I want information, not data. So that's one of the things Guardicore does is helps make this a more human readable format. I can look at this from an environment perspective. As here I see in production, I can see those various apps like Swift. I can see the various roles and dig down into it. But I don't have to just get stuck with this one view. I can look at this purely from a regulatory compliance standpoint. So as those of you who have regulatory compliance, I can look at this from a CCPA or GDPR, PCI, HIPAA. We allow multiple views of the same exact data. And as we see companies adopt more cloud infrastructure, Guardicore is not just showing you internally, or we're not one of those products that just focuses on the cloud. We can draw out the entire environment. So what if your infrastructure is inside Azure that's communicating with infrastructure in AWS, that's communicating with infrastructure on-prem? So that's the first thing is we want to identify those data flows out there. Now, let me get back to this presentation here. So bear with us as we. The second step is to map the flows of your sensitive data. So you saw earlier where you have identified where that data is located, but now what we want to do is we want to map how that flow happens. So if I come right here, I'm going to filter in, I'm going to pick on accounting here. It's one of my favorite assets to pick on is accounting for a few reasons. So what Guardicore is doing is showing you every accounting server plus one neighbor away, whether it's the domain controller that we're authenticating for identity, or even a Linux jump box that's managing that load balancer. Now with Guardicore, you're not stuck with just one view. I can manually rearrange these maps around, but I'm going to come in here and click hierarchy. And Guardicore is going to do its best to create a logical network diagram. And I'm going to rearrange this map to zero in on this accounting application, a traditional multi-tier app. So I have this load balancing web front end that's talking to an app tier, and I can see the app tier is talking to the database. But what Guardicore allows you to do is we provide rich layer 7 contextual information. So here I see that it's Nginx, and I can see its file path, the process ID, the file integrity monitoring hash, the username it's running as, even the command line. And I can see that Nginx is communicating with Tomcat. Specifically, it's the Java process. And as I go to that back end, I can see that this app is communicating, the Tomcat application is communicating to a Mongo daemon. So that's that mapping that Guardicore does, because we want to provide you the information so you can make those intelligent business decisions to create your micro perimeters. And so that's where we start getting into step 3 here. As I switch back, transition back to our presentation. So I'm going to step a little bit about something that's different about Guardicore is we're saying it's time to rethink your firewalls. The old way you would put these hardware-based firewalls, or you're putting switch ACLs, and you're doing it right here from a subnet or VLAN perspective. The problem is that doesn't stop the east-west or lateral movement. It's very slow and difficult to change. It's very network-centric policy. So when I was a firewall admin, I'd always have to look, okay, if I'm putting this firewall change in here, what's the impact to all these applications that are behind it, or this business unit that I've segmented off like my manufacturing lines. With the newer approach, you're creating more secure enclaves, smaller, I like to call them DMZs of workloads of one. So with a software approach, it's a lot more agile of a process. You don't have to worry about, I'm going to impact the entire organization. No, I'm looking at 2 points, 2 servers that are communicating with each other. So it becomes a very workload-centric policy. So we've seen it where we've had 45 applications, micro-segment with an application consisting of multiple servers. We've had customers that do it in 6 weeks, 0 downtime, because Guardicore requires 0 changes to your network, no changes to your applications, not even a reboot or restart. And we've lowered the risk of our customers up to 99%. And we've had customers say this is an 85% total cost of ownership over doing the traditional legacy firewalls. So that step 3 is now you want to architect your micro perimeters. And that's exactly what we're going to do here with Guardicore, is we're going to architect those micro perimeters. So here I have an app like accounting, and from Guardicore, I could even right click right here and edit policy. This is one of many ways we can do it within Guardicore. And I can say create an app ring fence, and I can right click and add allow rules. Another way of doing it with Guardicore is we have AI built into our product. We automatically identify applications. We auto label them. We auto suggest policies, and it focuses a lot on your infrastructure apps like Active Directory. And we have pre-built templates that we understand what these communication needs are, these applications. And then we have the do-it-yourself whitelisting type approach, where we support both whitelisting and blacklisting, but I can come in here and just run a quick wizard to quickly, not knowing anything about that application. Guardicore will go through the traffic logs and create policy based on that observed traffic. Other things that we do as we skip through here is, besides creating policies based on application, you also want to tie it to the user identity. That's why we have YouAttest joining us today. So in this case, I have a policy created that says org portal user. So this is mapping to an Active Directory group, can only use Chrome to talk to the org portal on Nginx on port 80. And here we're saying the same thing with e-commerce users. As I look at this next slide right here, or this next point, not only are we looking at it from an application focus, but what about your management control planes? The most highly attacked ports for ransomware is not some zero trust vulnerability. It's RDP, it's SMB, it's SSH. So let's make sure in this case from the secure administrative host or a jump box that the server administrators, this maps to either Active Directory domain admins or server operators or any created security group. They're the ones that can use PuTTY and Microsoft Terminal Services to communicate to all production servers, to the Microsoft service host, which is what RDP listens to, or the SSH daemon on ports 3389 and 22. And then we put policies in place that say anything else talking to production on RDP and SSH, let's block and let's alert on it. Let's be proactive about it. Now as I switch back over here to my screen on the presentation screen. That fourth part right here is talking about continuously monitoring your ecosystem. So what kind of monitoring do you have in place with your solutions right here? Can you detect lateral movements? Can you detect network scans? Can you see policy violations? You're saying this is my zero trust policy. Are you alerted if there's anything that's outside of your policy violations? And that's one of the things that Guardicore does. Not only do we do visualization, we do prevention, because I like to say we're early on in the cyber kill chain. We're not an EDR product. We're not trying to detect after the fact. We're going to prevent that. We're going to stop the spread of malware. In fact, with the Colonial Pipeline, last August, I was doing a proof of concept with a customer. That was the very first company to get hit by a dark side. The division that was testing Guardicore had it rolled out with micro-segmentation. We stopped it dead in its tracks. We prevented dark side from getting a foothold, but their other divisions got hit. They turned around and used us to help recover and respond to that within a day and a half. So in this case, we were able to alert them that, hey, something was going on right here in your environment. We can detect network scans. Guardicore also does what we call breach detection. Think of it like a honeypot. Where we detect lateral movements, we'll redirect that attacker to a honeypot that we spin up on demand, and we give them a full-blown working OS. It could be Linux, it could be Windows, depends on what the attacker is doing. And we record everything you do and provide a high-level forensic summary of what that attacker is doing, along with prescriptive remediations. We can show you step-by-step everything that attacker is doing. The other thing is Guardicore has OS Query built into it. If you're not familiar with OS Query, it's a tool that was created by Facebook in 2012. This allows us to query anything about that device. I can tell you on a laptop if it's an HP laptop versus a Dell laptop. But we can look for registry settings. But in this case, this is after the SolarWinds breach. We actually created a query for our customers to show, hey, do you have the infected version of SolarWinds? I can turn around and label this and say, this is vulnerable SolarWinds. And then I can immediately create a policy based on that label and saying, access to and from SolarWinds is blocked. So it's very quickly, I can come in here with those customers. What we showed them to do is come in here and immediately say, you know what? I want to create a simple policy that says source. And in essence, Tom, I'm not going to go through that because I know we have a lot of information. But basically, I can come in here and say source is SolarWinds, destinations any, and we're going to deny. And then we're going to deny access to SolarWinds, to and from. And then we put an override allow rule that says, okay, but the administrators are allowed to get to the SolarWinds servers so they can patch it. And then we turn around and use OS Query to make sure, has that device been patched? Does it have the right level of hot fixes applied? Now with SolarWinds, we actually had customers that said, yeah, Guardicore, you blocked it because we can do FQDN policy. I always say if there's one server I can hack in your environment, it's going to be your patch management because there's privileged rights throughout your entire environment. But what happened here? This case, it was a supply chain issue. Customers had it locked down saying, yes, SolarWinds Orion can only get updates from SolarWinds.com. But the Russians had hacked into SolarWinds, the company themselves, modified the binaries, and then customers downloaded the modified binaries. But what's the first thing that binary did? Even though we had FQDN policy, it didn't stop that binary from getting downloaded. But the first thing they did is reach out to other websites, malicious websites, to download other scripts. Well, our customers that said, hey, SolarWinds can only get its updates from SolarWinds.com, they saw where they stopped that additional malicious scripts from being downloaded. The customers that did not have that in place, but they still did a micro-segmentation policy saying only SolarWinds can do 161 UDP or ICMP across the network. As soon as those malicious scripts started to run, they saw policy violations. So we had customers say, hey, Guardicore, we actually went back in the logs. You stopped it dead in its tracks. And so that's where you want to get into this monitoring and tying into the entire ecosystem. And then embrace security automation and orchestration, where we tie into the tools like YouAttest out there, or for IoT, Armis, Order. We can tie into infrastructure switches like Cisco, Arista, or your SIM tools like Splunk out there. And so this final part we'll show you right here is that we have pre-built plugins created. We have an API. So everything you see about Guardicore is a RESTful API. Anything that you can do within UI, you can do more via our RESTful API. And that's what's important. That's what's going to allow tools like YouAttest and Guardicore and other tools to integrate directly with each other. We already have pre-built plugins with several products out there. And so that's that fifth step that you want to do is embrace that automation when it comes to zero trust. It's always a continuous process. So with that being said, we'll get us back to our presentation, back to our regular scheduled briefing. And at this point in time, I believe this is where we're going to hand it back to YouAttest. So in conclusion, I'm not going to read this to you guys because you can read this a lot faster than I can read to you, but you can see how Guardicore easily maps to those 5 steps of zero trust. So I'm going to hand this back to YouAttest.
Take it away, Austin.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Milton. I think that was extremely, informative and helpful, and the demo definitely had a great impact on making this a little bit more understandable. Cher is going to now go into the compliance side of things and how YouAttest is able to meet these. So with that being said, Cher, I'm going to pass it off to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Austin. So basically, when it comes down to UTest, and we're going to talk more about the AD side of things. One of the core features we have in UTest AD audit is reviewing the domain user service accounts. These accounts are created with limited access and privileges, and they're created for a specific reason. Within UTest, these accounts are associated with an API key, and their read and write privileges can be quantified for these services account. This was one of the requirements from many of our clients, and this is live now within UTest. Next slide, please. Perfect. So basically, this screen is when the user gets inside UTest and they go to the AD audit section and they click on creating an AD audit. They see this pop-up screen. The user first have to download a PowerShell script, and then they have to run that script on their AD server. What it does is it creates a CSV file. That file can be uploaded onto UTest through this user-friendly interface in the data source section. Once this is uploaded, the user hits upload and save, and they go to the next screen. Right, so this screen allows users to run the AD audit attestation campaigns on groups, individuals, and filter users through their managers based on the CSV that they have loaded, and gain insight into their access on the AD. And once they've selected those users, those groups, and if they want to filter it by the managers, they select those managers and hit next. And once they've done that, go to next screen, please. So this is the campaign details screen, which is created based on the CSV, which was loaded from the AD. And unlike other auditing tools, UTest makes it simple to audit your AD groups and users. These audit can help you monitor group membership and access rights to different groups, and provide a snapshot view of the current users, groups, and you can stop potential insider threats more quickly and review the changes if there are any with the campaign details screen. Next slide. Perfect. And the last but not the least is the advanced reporting side, which provides a meaningful and interpretable and a filtered audit information for the campaign that has been created. This provides an overview of the groups and the individual users of a campaign, the review date, the reviewer assigned to review the group of users, their profile details, their group details, also their status on AD. And if it is a service account, it is labeled as a service account and also provides the last login date. So as a total, this AD functionality provides a clear picture of all the changes made to your AD resources, including AD objects and their attributes, and helps you detect and respond to insider threats, privilege misuse, and other indicators of compromise. So this is live right now with Utest, and you guys can book a session and we can go through this in detail.
Thank you so much, Cher. Yeah, and going off of what he said, we're going to be now showing a live demo of actually outlining the process of this. And there's a couple things I want to touch on. This is going to be around Active Directory. And so going into this, let me just make sure I share my screen and we can jump into the live demo. Perfect. So over here, this is the YouAttest dashboard. Keep in mind, as I'm running this, there are a lot of features I will not be covering. I don't want to take up a whole hour of your time. So
Hey, Austin,
jumping into this.
Maybe I'm not seeing on this screen. You probably have a couple of screens.
Oh, thanks. Let's
No stress.
Perfect. Can you see it now?
There you go. See,
Yeah, we can see it.
I'm that's why the pandemic's been great, and people are not in the office next to each other, so I can't throw shoes at people like I used to, right, Milton? It's all good. Keep
Save
going.
me from many a shoe throw. So
Yes.
thank you,
Nerf
Garrett.
guns.
Perfect. So yeah, looking over this, here we have the YouAttest dashboard. You're actually seeing it now. And there are a lot of features that I will not be covering right now, just because, like I said, I care about your time. But going over what Cher mentioned, we want to cover the Active Directory auditing capability. Where he started was the data source right here. So this is all that's needed to get started. You simply just provide a name, you run this PowerShell script. We even have instructions right here that'll help outline what's needed, provide everything. And then once you have that, you're just going to choose the file and you're going to upload it into YouAttest. Here's an example. These are just some past files we've uploaded. You can see we try to stay current with them so they are updated by the month. Now, when we actually want to run this, we want to focus on a particular group maybe, or something that's critical that needs our monitoring. And we want to catch who has access to what, and also identify some of the service accounts. So let's create one of these. We're just going to go over to auto audits right here, user audits. And now I'm going to go to create new audit. Simply just click into this. We're going to switch this to Active Directory. And in this drop-down menu, you have the sources that you've uploaded. I'm going to select this one right here. We're going to name this one. I'm going to name it Admin Audit because let's focus on the admin, people who are part of the admin group in this audit. Click Next. Instead of selecting all users, I'm going to go to select individual user. And right here, we're going to filter by a particular group. So it's going to take what's in that sheet. All we have to do, type it in, and there you go. We can see our administrators right there. We can select that. I'm going to leave all users checked. You can see there's various options. If you have thousands, you could even take a random %, which is compliant with a few types of standards and requirements, but we're going to leave that blank. So it's going to pull everyone who is a part of the admins group. I'm going to click done right here. You can see it's just loading right here. It takes a couple seconds, so I'll refresh the page. And going into this, let's click in and see who is a part of the admin group. Now, what are you going to see right here? You're going to see all the users, yes, but you're going to see additional information. Right here, you can see if they're a service account. You can see their last login date, email, user manager, job title, user status, proposed status, and job description. All that information will be available. You can see if they are a service account, it'll show up as yes right there populated. So you'll be able to identify that. Now, if this member is also a part of other groups, you will be able to identify that as well. You can see going down to this user right here. We go into review groups. They're a part of the administrators group, but also the domain users, and in this case, alpha. From this point, you can go through and certify. You can revoke, or more importantly, go back out to the main screen. We can review these by delegating. So you could delegate this out to an individual right here, just by typing in whatever their email address is. You could assign it to a group of users to review this, just by typing in what group. Or we could go right here and go to auto delegate. And what this is going to do, it's automatically going to take their manager and assign it to review each of the users they're responsible for. So at that point, the manager will receive an email with a link that will lead them directly to the users they're responsible for. Then they could go in and attest, either certify or revoke this access. And as they're doing so, what's happening is they're creating a nice report that's saying what's happening, who's taking the action, when it's taking place, and who are they taking the action upon. And so going through this, you can see we have at this level, this user was certified for the administrators group by audit user. It says audit user right there because look, logged in as audit user, I made the change. It's going to record who actually took place. So going back out, once we've attested to everyone, we've gone through, certified off on all the users. We could go back out to our audits page, user audits, And there's a few things we could do here. We could download this report. And what this will do, you could type out whichever email address you want, and it'll send it to that individual. So if I type in mine and email the PDF report, we could even show user notes right there. It'll send that on over. Now, what does this report look like? Here I have it in this tab over here. You can see it shows the campaign name, the details, when it's due, who the users are, and going through, you can see it's going to have a detailed outline for each one of the users. It'll say the name, email address, their manager, job title, and so on. But right here, it's going to say, what's the status? Was it certified? Was it revoked? Who took the action? When was it performed? So this is really helping you when you're faced with an audit, when you're trying to see, were these people actually signed off on, who signed off on them, and when. It's clear as day right here in this report. Very easy. You saw it's pretty intuitive to figure this out as well. So you're not bearing your IT department with a ton of work. Extremely easy to set up, automatically delegate out, and get reports just like this. Perfect.
I gotta say something. This is awesome. Hope you don't mind I interject right now, Garrett. So as you see with Guardicore, we're creating that baseline for your zero trust for micro perimeters, and we help attest the actual individual process, but we're dependent upon Active Directory for the group permission. So as much as you want to keep auditing your firewall permissions, YouAttest comes in and says, okay, these are the users that Guardicore is using right here to get access to those critical applications. And now you can constantly review and attest who has those rights so you don't get into policy drift. And this is going to help speed up tremendously as you have to go through with auditors. We'll show you exactly from visually on a network map who's communicating with what, but YouAttest will come in there and say, here's who has the rights and when we validated and tested them. This is good stuff.
Yeah. And next slide. We got the slide. Because here's the bottom line, team out there. Guardicore has got some damn cool stuff. I loved what Milton was saying about the SolarWinds and how you can go in there and not by default, segment your groups the way Zero Trust is telling you to and will become a compliance measure, okay? But also identify the traffic and then mitigate the traffic itself. That's pretty cool. Do you know what audit is? Audit is boring, but it takes a lot of your time. I got some white papers coming out today. We already paid a CPA to show how much you're spending on your goofy audits. And they're not goofy. That's how we all do business, but they are time consuming. And the products out there are wrong. We were in a competition. The POC for a competitive product was $800,000 for the POC. We're $2 per user per month. Okay, figured it out. It ain't $800,000, not for the POC or for the license. That's why we're having Brian talk next. How do we put this together, Brian?
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the detail. Great information. So real quick, everybody, I want to introduce myself. I'm Brian Shepard. I'm an account manager with Cloud Ingenuity. And ultimately what we want to do is help you bring this together, as Garrett had talked about. We're a solution integrator, technology partner, but we want to be a different type of partner. And frankly, by that, what I mean is we don't want to always just lead with technology. We want to align with the people and the process, because that ultimately was what drives behavior. And, Garrett talked about it earlier, is why did this change happen, right? Why was this access granted? Well, chances are there wasn't a process in place, or the process was broken. So, that's part of the direction we want to go as a partner to you guys, is to ultimately drive those business outcomes. Let's understand that collectively. And because when you meet those business outcomes, that's what's going to drive that success that you guys are looking for. And that's the type of partner we really want to be. And we do this based on our experience and our approach. And this will tie back together, YouAttest and Guardicore, and I'll explain how. But the experience and our approach at going after the people, process, and then ultimately technology is based on our leadership. And we have leadership that is, has decades of experience in all areas, both or in customer facing areas. They've come from the customer, worked on the manufacturing side and on the partner side. So we use that leadership to help guide, everything from business driven decisions to ultimately down to the technology at our engineering level. So Austin, if you could switch to the next page, I'll give you a quick overview. So the way we approach this is, with mastery and all these different tenets. Obviously, today we've been talking about zero trust. So obviously that falls into that security realm. Milton talked about it earlier. There's multiple facets and pieces that really have to work together in tandem to create this zero trust framework. It's not just a micro-segmentation by itself. It's not just identity access or governance by itself. All of these have to work together. And that's where we want to bring our experience and offer this to you guys as a partner to come in and help you devise a strategy, understand what the business needs are. And then once you've started to define that and create the process and create the strategy behind that, then and only then do you really start to dig into the technology piece. Right? Oftentimes you can leverage current investments. Sometimes at that point is when you start to really identify the gaps and then ultimately bring that together. But it's expertise in these different areas, as I mentioned, the network, security. Obviously, the micro-segmentation we're finding is branching and spreading across multiple, silos, right? Network team is kind of vying for some of that. Infrastructure team is vying for some of that responsibility. Security also is, for sure. So having expertise in those areas is what's going to allow us to kind of step back and help you guys devise the plan and strategy and ultimately kind of work on what the business use case is and business need to ultimately create this framework that we've talked about. So that, and then you take that strategy and overlay the service capability. That's where our engineering staff is able to step in and ultimately, help you drive this to, that final execution, that implementation. And it's not always just about implementation, as you guys all have seen. It's, not only implementing, it's implementing correctly, and then also auditing that and keeping tabs on that. This is not one thing that you can, you certainly can't just stand up, segmentation overnight and expect that to work, long term. So you've got to always constantly audit that, and our services can step in and help you keep that alive and healthy and working well into the future. So, and I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, we're gonna now take questions. I see some coming in, so we'll make sure to get to those, but feel free. We're sticking on here for the full hour, so definitely type those in as we go along, and appreciate you sending those in. I'll get started with this first one, and Milton, I think this would be best for you, so be prepared. So this one is, how much micro-segmentation do most companies do? Just production from rest of the company, or multiple production, staging, testing, finance, etc.?
That's a great question, and thanks for whoever wrote that in. So the way I used to see companies go about with doing micro-segmentation is they would first do what we call environmental segmentation, say non-prod can't talk to prod. And then we'd see the application ring fences around their most critical applications. Maybe it's PCI compliance, and they allow all those servers within to communicate, but they want to filter what goes in and out so they can limit the scope of compliance. And we see them do that with their tier 2 apps. And then we see them come back and do with that true micro-segmentation on tier 1 apps. That's the way it was about 3 years ago. Nowadays, I actually get customers from day one. They're saying, we want to micro-segment across the board, not only with the servers, but also their endpoints, because they want to stop the reduce of malware spreading in their environment. They want to get to that true zero trust out there. When you deal with Guardicore and you deal with our PS guys, the first thing our PS guys like to ask you is, when this is all done, what is it you want your environment to look like? And they'll create a operation model on how you can operationalize micro-segmentation to get you to those goals. So we're seeing customers definitely. What I always recommend, though, is start off with your most critical infrastructure apps like Active Directory, DNS, NTP, because the reason why I say that is if any of those services go down, they impact your entire enterprise. So let's get those most critical apps is what my personal recommendation is to you first. And then you go after your most business critical, mission critical applications, whether it's going to be a finance app or an e-commerce portal or distribution, manufacturing, whatever it may be for your business need. Thanks, Austin.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Milton. Cher, I'm going to throw this one on over to you. So I think this was covered a little bit earlier, but they wrote this in just previous to that. So how does auto delegation work for audit? Can I get this to automatically force my managers to do reports?
Yeah, definitely, yes. So basically, auto delegation with Utest only works with Okta integration. So what it does, it allows the admin, when a campaign is created, to assign that campaign, the full campaign, to their users managers, which are available in Okta. So with just one click, a campaign can be assigned to their managers, which are there in a campaign, and they will have to respond to that. And it is like, yeah, they are forced to perform action on those records which are assigned to the managers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cher. Next question we have is, does micro-segmentation work with cloud resources? Milton, would you mind taking this one?
Yeah, absolutely. If you missed that part of the demo, Guardicore, not only do we show you what's internally on-prem, whether it's bare metal or hypervisors, we work with your cloud infrastructure services, whether it's AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, private clouds. We even support the Kubernetes out there, the PaaS services, so AKS, EKS, GKE. Our goal is to give you a single pane of glass to have a consistent policy across the board and do a consistent enforcement. Because yes, several of those cloud vendors have their own security groups, but you can't use Azure groups inside AWS, and you can't use either of those on-prem. So we want to give you that consistent one single pane of glass so you don't have to have a bunch of management control panels out there that you manage for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Milton. Brian, here, I'm going to throw this one over to you. And it's what product and services do you usually see with micro-segmentation?
A good question. So one thing that we are seeing, so first and foremost, before I guess we get into the product, one thing that I'm seeing just in the industry and talking to folks is segmentation for a lot of folks is still just an idea, right? You know, and a lot of folks are still kind of going after and chasing, how do you get, the segmentation? How do you micro segment? And now, and from a product standpoint, though, what I have seen over the last several years is there's actually been a couple monolithic, large solutions out there that have gone down the software-defined networking route for quite some time, trying to evolve into some micro-segmentation. And frankly, gosh, it's been over the last several years. I'd say a lot of those solutions are still probably in the middle of implementation, because they're so large and complex. I haven't seen a lot of success with some of those, but with some of the new technology, like obviously you guys have seen some of that today. It makes things much more nimble. And, the Guardicores of the world are exactly what, we are seeing as the leader from a product standpoint, from a technology standpoint, because it makes the stand up, the implementation so much faster. It's, the agent-based component allows you guys to simply drop in the software, deploy it as needed, starting with the critical assets, working their way out, and ultimately getting that time to visibility and time to remediation and control almost instant. With a little effort right up front, we're trying to do the visualization and then turning on the controls and the enforcement. You almost immediately have that access that everybody's looking for and have frankly been spending years trying to obtain. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian. So I really like this question, so I'm going to steal it. It's prefaced with need for my SOX report, and it's, can the audit tool YouAttest tell me when 80 users have been terminated? So this is a really cool feature, and there's a couple ways that we can handle this. So one, we could work with Okta event hooks and capture when someone is being removed from a certain group, automatically create a report that's going to be assigned to someone. And so you're going to be reviewing that, assigning it to whether that's the manager or user to review in real time. Say someone gets removed or added to a group. The other way is when you pull a report, just like I did when we were looking at who are all the admins. If this case was for a different group, you could pull that and you could see who has been deactivated and go through, check that, make sure that that's appropriate. You could also see who's activate and recommend and deactivate from that stage as well. So you could see deactivated, you could see activated, you could filter by it, you could run reports by it. And also if we go a little bit further, which we didn't have time to get to, you could capture that in real time as well. So really good question. Love answering that one. Kind of sticking to that, we had a question, and Garrett, I don't know, it looks like you may have answered this in the chat, but I just want to make sure that we get this one fully answered.
I'll read it and then whatever. The question
Perfect.
was, you say, is YouAttest complete our NIST compliance? No, I just straight out. It is a tool that helps you respond and it is a tool that you use to respond to the auditors to meet your compliance. What we found out in our TCO studies is that people were spending countless hours and weeks on certain aspects of each of those compliance I talk about. Okay, PCI, SOC, et cetera, of the access review portions. We automate that process, as Austin shows, and as we'd love to show you in one-on-one and go through your environment and do it. And we take that time where it's sometimes weeks of FTE times and bring that down to hours. So then you would then have the deliverable. What's the deliverable? In governance, it's the report that all these managers, as Cher answered, delegated out to the right people. All those managers have attested to the access, whether it's network access, whether it's application access, whether it's data access. Someone has attested to those. That's what the PBC is, the provided by client that gets handed back to the auditor. Okay, why don't we take one more, Austin?
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, let's get to this one. So it's, can I get an audit product to do a diff between different time periods, say my user groups at the start of the quarter and the end of the quarter? Sharon, I know you and your team are kind of working on something like this. You mind taking it?
Yes, not right now, but the good news is this is something that we have started developing this week. And hopefully this will be live in a month or so. So this would allow the users to audit their campaigns between different time periods and different user groups. So this is something that we have started working on, and this will be live within a month or so.
Exactly, sure. We've had that request for a while. We're just prioritizing, and that's a big one because our next webinar is going to be Changes Audit. We got an audit team coming on with us and all fun. But that's today. Let's wrap up and thank the wonderful guests. Milton, first of all, you killed it. That was great. You know your stuff. Guys, if anyone you have any question about micro-segmentation and zero trust and good war stories, come to our friend Milton. Brian, great job wrapping it up. I mean, he's the reseller guy. So let's go to him first and he can tie this together. So all good. Okay.
Yeah, it was great doing a webinar again with you.
Yeah, it's fun. We'll do more. Rinse and repeat, right?
Exactly.
Talk to you. And everyone stay safe out there. All the best.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys. Just bye.